Go míle maith Gaeilge Weekly an Sachtan seo. A very quick one before we get going. If you've been learning Irish for a while, but you still feel stuck or frustrated when it comes to speaking, that is exactly what we fix on the Learn Irish Online membership. As an LIO member, you get the structure and help you need to finally start speaking with real confidence from day one. Because unlike other schools or apps, we teach you what you actually need to know for everyday use of the language. You can sign up for a free trial today. I guarantee within a week you'll feel clearer in speaking the language and how you can continue your progress moving forward. If not, you can cancel. You've lost nothing. But guess what? In 2025, over 90% of learners just like you who signed up stuck with us after their free trial because it made a serious difference in their ability to speak as Gaeilge, and the majority of them are still with us to this day. You can join now at patreon.com/learnirishonline or simply search for us on the Patreon app. Germany calling, gleich on Yarmon, gleich on Yarmon. That's the translation of the famous words Sinné Astrachan in the focal callula that were heard throughout the United Kingdom a chlosú tríd an Richteintia during the Second World War. Ire an Dara Choga Downda. They were coming from a lad living over in Germany, Vishig Tacht o lad in the Choni Hall sa Chiarmon, who was born in the United States, a rugu since thought Saintia 40 years previous, Carcablin River, but that grew up in County Galway, a dos anís I Gunne na Gaillimhe, and that went to the same school as myself. A hui agus a drastal mionschool céanna mar mé hain. Today, we're going to be doing another bit of a deep dive or look at history by no deep dive beagnaíon agus ag labhairt faoi scéal éigean ó stair na hÉireann, and we're going to be speaking about one person in particular by labhairt faoi duine amháin ar le, and that is William Joyce, or as he was often known, William Joyce na mar Leo Gominic, Lord Haha. Some of you will already know the story. Cínse go mbeidh an scéal seo eolalas ag cuid wa agah se hana féin. Some of you will have no idea who I'm talking about. Cuid wat síomh ní bhaidh aon smaoinemh nó ní bhaidh aon clú agah se cé ó bhfuil mé ag labhairt faoi. But don't worry, we're going to go through it and I'll explain the different parts of this very eventful life on sale in a row. A lán ruddy Siúlán that William Joyce had from 1906 to 1946 a bhí ag William Joyce ó nídeag is a sé go nídeag carcha sé. So, as I always say, before we get into it, mar dearma gcónaí rih agus much, and I always say this on the kind of history or story episodes of the podcast, you gcónaí dearm é so ag tús na pudchrailtaí a bhaineann leis an stair nó scéaltaí, is that I'm not a professional historian, ní starry profisiúnta mé. I've made every effort to make sure that all the facts and stats and everything else and dates are correct. Tá gach iirecht déint agam, chun déanú cínta gohfuil gach dáta agus gach fearach agus gach písa ólis, every bit of information, gohfuil sé céad fungéid ceart 100% correct. If there is something small missing or date slightly incorrect, man tá dáta éigean beag na mí cheart na rud éigean in asnamh bronerm. I think everything's right, but just small disclaimer before we begin. So, to begin, chun tús chur leis seo, we have to go back to 1906, and not to Galway or Salthill or Oranmore, ní Bochran no Gaillimh, no Oranmore, or any place like that, no áit mar sin. We have to go across the Atlantic to Brooklyn, New York. Caithimid dul trasna chuig an Atlantic go Brooklyn nua Arrock. Nowadays, they might have the World Cup there and the New York Knicks winning a month ago in the NBA Finals. But back then, 100 years ago, very different place. And one young lad who was growing up there, no, who was born there, lad awad a rugu on sin, was William Joyce. Now, you might be thinking, why over in the US, and especially with an Irish name or an Irish surname like that, le slina éireannach cosúil, le sin céim fá ar á sé hall since thoughts aintia. Well, his parents were unsurprisingly Irish. His father was a Catholic Catholic a bhí ann leis an tathair, and the mother was Protestant. She was English but Irish family, Sasnach le clán éarnach ach Protestúnach a bhí inchi. But probably more interesting than that, níos simúla ná sin, and more important agus níos tábhachtaí, is that, okay, obviously the mother was Protestant, bhí an mháthair Protestúnach, so she had very little sympathy for the idea of a free and independent Ireland, ní raibh mór an sim eici maidir le éire agus saoirse a bheith ag éire agus ar nabhspleách agus gach rud mar sin. But the father, even though he was Catholic, was also the same. He was a unionist. Cé go raibh sé ina Chathlicach, bhí sé sin ag éirí go bhainfí éire mar chuid den ríoch daintia. And this was important a few years later, around 1910 or 11, when they moved back to Ireland. Hartar níteag is sé, nó níteag is a héinteag agus bhog siad arás go hÉireann. So they're very much in the minority and were very different to, I suppose, a lot of the other people around them in County Mayo, where they first were, and then when they moved on to Galway afterwards. Bhí siad an tifriúil I gcomparáid leis na daoine timpealler who, nuair bhog siad arás ar dús chun na Mayo agus an sin híos go chun na Gaillimhe. Side story, actually, William Joyce's father, when they moved to Mayo first for a year or two, he set up a pub that I think is still there called Tucker J's, just outside Westport. So husi sé tacht orv, nags ceapam gúil sé fós hall an sin I gunna Mayo, directive way to Westport, agus Tucker J's an tanamatá anish. So maybe a few people listening have popped in there for a pint before and didn't know that was Lord Haha's father who set that pub up originally, and Beidir Knockrau is like Dini agus Beidir Girl she'd on sin Rivershaw a gold pionta gur hossi her Lord Haha on pub shin and girl she Portugal lied that he was at least involved with it in some way. So they moved down to Galway, and again, William Joyce is young, probably only 5, 6, 7, 8 years old around this time. Cuaig sé seacht ocht mlína díos hart an am seo, and he straight away became interested at a young age in politics. So Hanna féin ag is óg bhí sim mór aige sa pholaíocht, and again had very different political leanings or opinions than other people the same age as him. So bhí tuirmí politúla ansafriúil aige I gcomparáid le daoine eile timpealler ar choís leis. So while so many people at that time, and again this is coming up to 1913, 14, 15, 16, the Dublin lockout and the Easter Rising in 1916, Iríach na Cásca in Nídeag Séideag, it was a big thing that everybody was talking about. Bhí sé mór in mail an phobal ag an am sin. But William Joyce felt and was very happy to express this to other people. Bhí sé lán-sás le honna seo a chur anúil le daoine eile that Ireland was better off as part of the UK, very pro-British, a British patriot. Britannia rules the world and ruled Britannia and all the rest of it, and especially World War I going on this time on Chéad Cogad down there a shul ag an am seo. He would often tell the more so pro-Sinn Féin boys in his class that Britain were doing a great job in World War I. Dúirt sesin leis na lads in a rá Beidir son Sinn Féin sa rang scoil gur rá an bhratan ag déanamh jobíntach sa Chéad Cogad Domhanda. And what class or what school exactly was he in? He was in a Jesuit school in Galway City. Bhí sé I scoil Isánach I Lór Chachar na Gaillimhe. And interestingly enough, it's the exact same school that I went to. An scoil céanna a drastal mé hín from 2012 until 2018, 2012 ó 2018. It's still a Jesuit school, although there's no priest. Well, our principal, actually, when I was there, was a priest. Sarah Tavian, our prívidsa agus misha an sin, but all the teachers, it's just a normal school now. I suppose a bit different because it's Jesuit, but it's not fee-paying. So ní chaithí tú bheith ich chun bheith sa scoil, ach scoil Jesuit atá ann, like some of the fee-paying ones up in Dublin. And it's also one of the only schools in the country that doesn't have a school uniform. Ceann tin tain scoilna timpeall na tíre nachhfuil éadaí scoile acu. And that's where I was from 2012 to 2018, the same campus as William Joyce, so the same, maybe not the exact same classrooms and buildings because of renovations and everything else. Beidir near Almace na Shomarangi Dírach mar an Gaeilge, but certainly walked the exact same path on the school ground many, many times during those 6 years as William Joyce. Bhí me ag súil chosáin na scoile neart orintha agus mission sin mar a rinne William Joyce. He was very extreme in his opinions around this time. 1915, he started in the Jes, as it's often called, or Closh de Gnod, the Jesuit College in Galway. So bhí sé an extreme máidir leis na tuirmí politúla agus na smuointí bhéige hartar an am seo. And he even had 1 or 2 fights, one of them in which he had his nose broken. Ceant in tridna sin, bhris lad eile ó Throne. And because of this, his voice kind of permanently changed and became much more nasal tone. So dahraí a ru agus dahraí an chuí ará sé ag labhairt nó cuma ará a ru in íos sin, which will become important later on in the story by sin tábhachtach níos déanaí sa scéal. But of course, once World War I finished, the War of Independence in Ireland was in full swing. So agus an chéad cogad down de Creeknú I mína saona níd ag is ochtaig, the War of Independence cogna saoirse in Éireann, bhí sé ar siúl, bhí neart rudaí ag tarlú, and William Joyce, even though he was only about 12, 13 years old at this time, began to get involved, especially towards the end of the War of Independence when the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries came in. Ar tháinig na Black and Tans agus na auxiliaries isteach ag deireadh chuga na saoirse, thosaí sé a bheith níos pórtaí agus ag carú leis na Black and Tans agus na auxiliaries. So for people who don't know, these two groups, the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries, were ex-World War I soldiers, ar haidirí on chéad chugad down. They were brought in to help the British effort, I suppose, to stop any form of Irish independence or rebellion. So tháinig siad isteach ag deireadh chuga na saoirse chun carú le arm na bratainna chun gachrad a stopú in Éireann agus chun a bheith trid in an IRA. And they had a really bad reputation for being cruel, hard, callous, so crálach agus Jean agus an crua ar winter na Héireann, very, very hard on Irish people. But William Joyce was one of the only people around Galway who knew the place who was actually helping him. It says online he worked for them as a courier. I'm sure that wasn't like DHL or anything like that, or DPD, but probably sending messages and sending 1 or 2 packages around Galway, beidir ag seoladh cúpla pacáiste nó cúpla teachtaíocht timpeall na Gaillimhe. But one thing very controversial, and that, again, I was told about a lot growing up in Galway, agus dúir lum, agus mise ag fásamh níos in Gaillimh about this story faoin scéal seo, and that is the murder of Father Michael Griffin. Dúnmharú an tathair Michael or Michael Griffin. So again, this is the first part where there's 1 or 2 rumours and we're not fully sure what happened on chéad piece on seo nach féidir lena bheith céad fungéad cínsa maidir le cad a tharla. But what's said is that someone went to Father Michael Griffin's house, and Black and Tans, the auxiliaries, is suspected that he might have been helping the IRA. Cap sheets and beidir grá sé carú leis an IRA. And so someone went to the house and said, I've got a sick relative, they're dying, can you come and give the last rites and to bless them? So tá duine éigean I machláán tá si tín, nó tá carad tín agam, an féidir leat teach lumsa agus na last rites a thuirt stómh agus iad a bhanú. So of course, the job of a priest then and now an postatá ag sagart an sin agus inis was to go, you know, and your duty calls, it's your vocation, you have to go. So he left and was never seen again. So hui sé agus ní chonchas aríist é. And apparently he's brought somewhere, questioned by the Black and Tans, shot, and then he was left out on a bit of bogland, I suppose you could call it, a Portuck, where? In Barna, the place where I grew up, in Marna an Áits, a dás me héin anís. In fact, there's where he was left, there's a kind of monument or commemoration to Comoro Owen, and it's right beside the Gaelic football pitch that I played on hundreds of times as I was growing up. Díreach inacha leis an borc, cuman luchas goil a zimmer me héin agus mise ag fásu anís. So I've several connections to this kind of story one way or another, but as does anyone who grew up on the kind of west side, Salthill, Barna, Furbo, or the west side itself, Knocknacarra, or Galway City even, at any point over the last 100 years. On scale céin le aine a dás an níos mór na trá nó cnoch na carthach nó na Furbica nó Barna nó cartha na Gaillimh a fiú le aon or le céad bliain. So it's not something directly personal, and I certainly don't agree with his policies or politics go náithníl mé ar choin sin le na chuid políochta. Come on. So the story with this is that a lot of people said, and there were reports at the time saying that William Joyce was the person who went to the door and lured Michael Griffin out. Gurbin William Joyce an lad a bhí an doras ag an am agus a bhall Michael Griffin out. Okay? As an sach. But we're not fully sure. There's even a report from the time from an officer that says they were speaking Irish at the door. So William Joyce might have been a Gaeilge, Seansgur Gaeilge ag William Joyce, but it does become, and even with all the research I've done, as gach piece of taide, it does become a bit blurry around then. But one thing we know for sure, Rudwan afraid like Keensafui, is that around this time, there were threats against William Joyce's life because people in the IRA did believe he did it. Chiapalon, the Eastern IRA, Tiarna shin. And the War of Independence was coming to an end. It was clear there'd be some type of Irish Free State or independent Ireland go make air and navshblach again on Free State. And so he got out. Judge William Joyce left, and he wanted to be in Britain anyway, which Galway was no longer going to be a part of. Ishe Geary of Savratan Arenos agus Arnoit Nero Galiev Mar Huids Zan Richteintia Egg on Amshin. So he headed over to England and he joined the army, who he said trusting Assassina, agus who he said shocks an arm. But there was one problem. He wasn't 18 years old. Níor sé ucht mlína deag dish. And by this point, you had to be 18 to be in the British Army. I think before that, it might have been 16. And Beta Rivishin during the First World War, Beta Grau sé deag. But by this point, you had to be 18. Ag buinte so virt a bheith ucht mlína deag dish. He was only 17. They found out. They kicked him out. So forsin mach na grau sé ucht deag, and he was off. But I suppose showed he was genuinely, wasn't just talk, he was committed to the cause and fighting for Britain. Vis Lansostan Trids or son Nabratana, even though he wasn't 18, Kena Kraushe an ish ceart chun é. So he went down a more, I suppose, conventional route for a few years. Husí teag déanú rud a níos mó mar an gná rud le cúpla bliain. Nor fat couple blin, he studied and became a teacher, husí sé ag déanú stadir, agus an sin diary sé mar woundshore. But you need to remember what was happening in Europe and in the world at this point through the 1920s. Caitu cuimhnú cadaví ar siúl, tríd an down I ri na níd ag Fiji. In 1922, Mussolini became the dictator and the leader of Italy. In 1923, Hitler had his beer hall putsch in Germany. So it needs ag fehidó, Hussi no Zairi Mussolini, mar cheanaran na Hidala. And rud céanna needs ag fehidrí Hitler, and that kind of started his path out to eventually becoming the leader of Germany and the very much, without question, leader and dictator a few years later. And Jacktor Cúpla Blin in a Yishin. That already started with the putsch in 1923. And of course, throughout loads of countries, there were efforts to do the same thing that we don't really hear about. So it's a long tíortha difriúla hí iarachtaí cosúla seo ar siúl chun an rud céanna a dhéanamh, because people thought this might be the future and this might be just how things go in the future. Beidir go might na rudí céanna ar siúl sa tauki. You would had Lenin come in 1917, 1918 as well, and Soviet rule, which although not fascist, cinach raibh sé fascistach, it was kind of the same thing, that one leader and no elections and all the rest of it. So ní raibh a ceanarán agus ní raibh in tauchan in rodella. And so there were some people who tried to do something similar in Britain. Bhí daoine agus rinne siad an rud céanna na rinne siad iirecht chun an rud céanna a dhéanamh sa bhreatain. In 1932, William Joyce joined the British Union of Fascists. So who says Jack Lesh on BUOF, the British Union of Fascists? Oswald Mosley, who some people may have heard of, Chance Goel Atnegdini or Oswald Mosley. He was the leader. Again, fun side faction, shows you how small the world is, or small history is. Kiggle Biogs at all on Star, especially in between the UK and Ireland and Europe, is that when I was growing up watching F1, and I'm still a very big F1 fan, first time I gaffa lesh an F1, the boss, the kind of head honcho of Formula 1 was Max Mosley, who was Oswald Mosley's son. Max Mosley agus been mock Oswald Mosley, which was controversial sometimes, but I suppose you can't blame the son of, or the daughter of these people. It's not their fault. Ní féidir leat an lucht occur mick no iníocha na daoine seo. So he went into this group and they tried to do the same thing that, the black shirts and the brown shirts did in Germany initially. Rinne siad iireachtain an rud céanna a dhéanamh mar rinne Mussolini agus Hitler leis an black shirts agus the brown shirts sa Hearmán agus an Idal. Didn't really work, but there was a lot of stuff throughout the 1930s with different protests and fights and rallies. agóidí ag trídanna rallies timpeall háiteanna. They were very anti-Semitic, but it didn't really work. And while you can say a lot about British history, Kigwald to on neart ruddy raw if we start na Bratana, one thing you really have to commend them on is how they stopped any type of fascist uprising or seizure of power throughout the 1930s. Cé chuirsiad stop leis an fascistichas I rith na níd ag trocaidí. Throughout the late 30s, there were more laws brought in that you couldn't do X, Y, or Z, and stopping, these type of military uniforms from these groups. Chánig níos mó dlíte steach tríd na níd ag trocaidí maidir le béad éadaí difriúla agus riadcha difriúla faoi seo to try and stop. And similar things happened in Ireland with Eoin O'Duffy, Harla ruddy cosúla seo le Eoin O'Duffy in Éireann. And as it came closer to the start of the Second World War, agus gachtainna ag drídsam le tús an Dárdaoin Domhanda, it became clear that was going to be a war fought on fascism versus freedom and democracy and all the rest of it, or at least in Britain, it would seem like that's a vratan vechshik sula shin. William Joyce realised we'll probably be put in prison if we stay here. This will all be outlawed. Shans ma gagurfi sa frizun muds ma anan muds on so agus divine cadagin isho it hasn't really worked out like it did in Italy or Germany. I'm off. And where am I off to? I'm off to Germany. Kianlot rachime Tomei hundol hall gadi on Ghiarmon. So funny, very similar thing that happened, in Ireland, where he was like, British imperialism was more important to me than being in Ireland and my home country, I guess. Tá sé sin níos tábhaidí ná mar bheith in Éireann agus bheith in Láillimh. Same thing then about 20 years later, and Rud cén fiche bliain in he said, fascism, even though I'm a proud British man, bhfuil me an bhródú le bheith im a bhreatanach, I'm going to Germany, and fascism and Nazism is more important. Fascistichas agus a Nazism sin níos tábhachtí dumsa ná aon rud eile. So a few days before World War II, literally a few days before World War II started, cúpla lá ribh a thosaí an Dárdaoin Domhanda, he headed off to Germany. Hui sé hall wig na Gearmána. Now, before I go on, just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this podcast and you're saying you'd like more like this and you want to actively improve your Irish and learn the language in the right way, not the way that a lot of other pages and schools and courses teach it, but actually get speaking and engaging with the language from day one, learning real Irish, not just token phrases. Don't forget to get involved with our other stuff at Learn Irish Online. Two main options. You can get involved with the membership and sign up for a free trial today at patreon.com/Learn Irish Online. Loads of material over there for you to get involved in, or sign up for one of our courses. They're all self-paced, lifetime access, and very comprehensive over on the main website. That's learnirishonline.com. Okay, all the links down below in the description, and I guarantee you it's going to be the most important step you take in terms of actually finding real confidence speaking, understanding, writing, and reading in the language over the next few months. So after he arrived in Germany, Threistal Striku Sugiaramon, World War II started literally a few days later. Hossi on Dárdaoin Domhanda cúpla lá in Inishin, and he got a job pretty quickly through a bit of a coincidence. Just bumped into someone, Trico Harlu. He was in Berlin, by the way, Visha in Berlin, and he met someone who knew someone, and they said, "Oh, will you come in for an audition?" And Fitz chat the stock agus by audition again. And you might be able to do a bit of speaking, bit of broadcasting first. Chance go might to on. Beidir lauert spiognin agus spiognin creil torocht a yenu doing ya. Of course, at this time, no television, so radio was very much through World War II the main form of communication. Bhí an radio I ré an Dárdaoin Domhanda mar príomh meán na cumarsáide. So his brought in, apparently he had a cold the day he went in for the audition and wasn't able to speak that well. He slide on egogs the Rauschel on Lauertroa, but he still got given the job. And so within a few weeks of design, I'm leaving Britain, he's now working in Germany. He wasn't necessarily working directly for the government, or he wasn't, chatting to Hitler and Goebbels every day and saying, what should I tell the Brits? Chad Becartam Raw Lesh Rathanig. But his job was basically to be in this place. It was originally Berlin, and sometimes he was moving around and doing it from different studios. Vi sé ag bugud timpeall agus ag déanú na taifeadí studio difriúla, one near Hamburg, another one in Luxembourg, ceann one in Hamburg, ceann eile Hunger to Luxembourg, and he was sending basically long wave, or they were sending the kind of radio station or broadcast on Creiltorch, no on Stáisiún radio. They were sending long wave radio signals over to Britain so that they could would send English language propaganda and the German version of what was going on in the war, the German version of events. So in Lagan, Germánach, Badger, like cod a bhí ag tarlú leis an gugu over to England as a form of intimidation, propaganda, getting in people's head and to break the morale of the British people. Much of the propaganda agus just hun turn me Bratanacha a ahrú beagnaín agus beagnaín intimidation, beagnaín agla a chur or winter na Bratana Cove Ma. It was 100% propaganda, the stuff he was on about, propaganda céad fungéad a bhí ann. And there were loads of kind of people doing this in the English language in Germany at the time. Bhí neart daoine déanann rud so iméarla ag an am seo sa Ghearmán. And there was one or two journalists in the UK who actually gave the name Lord Ha Ha as a general name for anybody doing this in Germany. Tugu an tanam so urhu mar anam generalta. Like aine ag déanamh an fust seo nó an job seo sa Ghearmán. But after a few months, it only stuck with William Joyce. So tar éis cúpla mí don sé le William Joyce agus don sé le Joyce a bháin, and he became the Lord Ha Ha in the minds and in the mouths of the British people. So in Inseen agus a male Windsor na Bratana. And this isn't something that was just a few people were listening to him now and again. Most of the country were listening to him and knew who he was. And chuid is smó den tír bhí isacu cé a bhí ann. They were doing a survey at one point, survey points of one, and they found out 6 million people in the UK listened to him regularly. Bhí 6 million daoine ag éisteach leis go rialta during the war, and 18 million, yes, 18 million. And again, not sure what the population of Britain would have been at the time, maybe about 30 million or so, hard to 30 million, but 18 million bhí siad ag éisteach leis ó am go ham. They were listening to him occasionally from time to time. So here's a little clip so you can hear what exactly he sounded like and what type of things he was on about on the broadcast. So clip beag onas go maith bhfuil éisteach le beaganín de chad a dúirt sé agus na rudaí a raibh sé ag labhairt fuhu. And see, I'm not sure, can you pick up an Irish twang or an Irish accent here in a few parts? Bear in mind, he was only in Ireland for about 10 years. You only raibh sé in Éireannach ar fad beidir Gemlína, but did have Irish parents. Bhí Tishmori Éireannach aige. I know, you be the judge, is féidir latsa raw. Does he have an Irish accent? Well, blas Éireannach aige. And again, how much of this accent was put on to be more British? Beidir an blas so rinne sé iirecht on the Venice Bratany ar an Crailú on the broadcast. I don't know. But here's William Joyce, and with his famous lines, Germany calling, Germany calling.
Germany calling, Germany calling, Germany calling.
One would describe as the height of cynicism the message sent by the First Lord of the Admiralty to the captain of the British destroyer Cossack, congratulating him on his gallant rescue efforts. Only a person of Mr. Churchill's mentality could congratulate anybody, first on shooting unarmed men, and secondly, on flagrantly violating Norwegian neutrality.
So that was the type of thing that the British people were listening to again and again and again throughout the 6 years of the war. Sin an sais rud ará na Bratanig ag éisteach leis arís is arís ire sé bliana an chuga. And there's a bit of debate tá buúnaí sais G-sport in terms of how effective this was. Kick-off éifichtach is atá sé. You know, often it's written now that he was just a figure of fun and no one took him seriously, or size figure of fun, no character of Ian, agus níor aon sim dáire ag daoine, they listened to more so for entertainment, fís de géisteach níos mó chun beagnaín síimsíochta a all. But I'm not fully sure about that. Níl céad fan géad cínte faoi sin. Maybe towards the start and the end of the war, but you must remember around 1940 and 41, níte carcha for a good while, it really did seem like Germany were going to win the war. Bhí cuma agus cuma soch soléir go raibh an Ghearmán hon an coga a bhuacaint. And so, you know, if you're hearing all these things, Germany is the power and the future of Europe, and the British people must surrender, otherwise London and towns across the south of England will be flattened and bombed, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, and you'll excuse the accent, but if you're hearing those things, má tá tú géisteach leis na rudaí sin, nó má tá tú chun na rudaí sin a chostáil, at least some people must have been thinking, Jesus, this is not good. There was, a point where it seemed like the invasion of Britain was only a few days away. Bhí points éigean agus bhí chuma nach raibh beidir cúpla lá ó British invasion agus beidir an sin the Brits coming over to Ireland. And speaking about Ireland, in one of the broadcasts ag Lords faoi éireann an sin gan amháin sa na chraoltaí hartar an am show when it seemed like Germany were going to win and Germany were very much had the upper hand agus bhí an lá vinúachtar acu. He actually mentioned the Galway races in Ballybrit, where the Galway races do be on and will be on in a few weeks. An áit a bhíon Rossi na Gaeilge Versúil agus an áit a bhaisí their shul i gan cúpla seachtain. And he said they should spruce up Ballybrit because Herr Hitler would love to attend in a few weeks, and maybe they should move it back to September so he can attend, because it might take us that long to get over to Ireland. So, if you're here in that, for example, if you're an Irish man from Galway living in London, beidir gur éireannach chu i do chónaí London ag an am sin, you're listening to that, you must be a bit scared at least. Seans má go méich beagnaí nagla ort a laiad. I suppose at the same time, the Brits were getting their propaganda from their own news and from the BBC, probably telling them everything was going great. Seans má grau siad ag fáil propaganda on the nuachtain ag rá tá gacrad fearfa agus tá an bhreatain hon gacrad a bhuachan. So tough to know, but I think again it might have been more effective than people think. It's easy now. Ceapam hain grau siad níos éifeachtaí ná mar cheapan daoine. Of course, it's easy now because we know Germany didn't win the war, and often in history we kind of paint these people as figures of fun, agus bímad ag figures of fun agus charactery a bhí ann nó bhí untu ag an am. But it's a lot easier to say now in 2026 that Britain won the war and Nazism was stopped. Chur stop leis an Nazism ag an am sin agus gur bhuaí bhreatain an cogu. But, not as easy to say if we're all here speaking German. Ní bheith sé cóhhéasca le rá do méich mud go léir an seo ag labhairt as Germánis. But anyway, that didn't happen. Of course, the war changed Dahri on Kuga and Germany's invasion into Russia and everything else that didn't go well. The Germanic ag dullas teach le Operation Barbarossa ag dullas teach on Tínta Sovéitach agus an Rúis did not work. And in the end, it became clear in spring 1945, bhí sé sular Sanarach Níteg Cur Chuig that the Allied forces were going to win. Gur out an Allied forces on Buchant, and the final broadcast from William Joyce, or Lord Ha-Ha, on Creilú Tiarnach o Joyce, na Lord Ha-Ha, on Tiarna Ha-Ha, it's very that raw, and that's the name of this podcast. Sin an Teidil on Tanamatá on Bud Creile Sho, Tiarna means Lord. The final broadcast was on the same day Hitler killed himself, on Lá Céanna a chur Hitler love in a Vos Hain. And it's fair to say that Joyce had had a few drinks before he went on air, let's say. Ceapan gúil say fearál sa le rá gur cúpla duck, beidir cúpla brandies ag Joyce riv a thosaí sé ag tafadú. Have a listen to this.
Beg you to realise that the fight is on. You have heard something about the Battle of Berlin. You know that there a tremendous world-shattering conflict is being waged. Good. I would only say that the men who have died in the Battle of Berlin have given their lives to show that whatever else happens, Germany will live. And therefore I say to you, in these last words, you may not hear from me again for a few months. I say, Es lebe Deutschland. Heil Hitler, and farewell.
So that was Joyce, a bit, only a small bit, drunk, beagnaín, just beagnaín meisce an sin. And of course the writing was on the wall. If you inscribed North Mala to give you a terrible direct translation in Irish. Ag bhí sé solar le feicáil, it was clear to see what was going to happen. Cad a bhí chun tarlú in those days. And of course, a week later, World War II in Europe was over. Seachtain in sin bhí an dara chug down that snorp Creeknia. So, unlike a lot of people who were involved in the Nazi movements, because ní chosúla lán daoine bhí pórsach in lúiseacht on Nazism ag an am. He didn't die or kill himself straight away, but he headed off and actually survived a few weeks somewhere else. So war sé cúpla seachtain á tegan eile. He was up with his wife on the Danish-German border. Bhí sé chús an sin Tsorán nó in aice leis an Tsorán idir an Danmhairg agus an Ghearmáin. He was staying there for a few weeks, and of course, around this time, there were a lot of Allied soldiers, British and French soldiers, kind of mulling around Germany, keeping things under lock and key, and making sure that things didn't kick off again. Ag déanú cín sa nach chuir rudí chun tosú arís agus nach méach in triblogy and that there'd be no troubles. And one day, Joyce ended up, or one of the soldiers bumped into Joyce and started speaking to him in French and then in English, Saranki, agus an sin Imerla, and he recognised the voice. He recognised that nasal tone that Joyce picked up in a fight in my school, Closh Gnod the Jez. So, bhí sé an lan an tone sin agus an go sin ón trids a bhí ag Joyce blianta ribh sin ag láiste ag Gnod on the same campus where I did my studies an campus céanna in Rinne and my studs are hain about 40 years before, or it would have only been about 20 years before, in fact, actually at this point. Because again, Joyce was a young man, he's only 39 at this point. You're check trucking egg on buinte seo. And he thought, the soldier thought, chap on side, this lad might be William Joyce. So asked for his passport, agus, chuirse ceiste an fridge on pass, agus papers, please, the documentation. A hort agus a haspáint dumsa, and Joyce had a false passport that had a different name. So we passed Bregakega la Adam Tifrul. And the story, and again, this is probably another one of the rumours that isn't fully confirmed, Neil say but the story is that Joyce reached for the passport, so who says Jack in the Folka, Hunan Pass a Horchamak, and the soldier thought he was reaching in for a gun, Yapan Sider, Grau Sheikhon, Gunna a Horchamak, and so he shot him right there and then. In, well, the arse, basically. Schui Lút Zurich Sachul A. And then they did a check and it was Joyce and they brought him back to England. So Hui Joyce Arash Whig Hasana, where of course he had to stand trial via Dulles Jachs Trial. And a very high profile, one of the highest profile post-war trials that there was in England. Cian Trinla is Callula Dirchtreich on Dar Chugadanda Aviaun I Sassana. And there was a lot of controversy around the trial. Vilan Kunstbodes modulation trial because he was done for treason, or that was the charge labelled against him. So Visan Sin Lahai treason, but his passport was obtained, his British passport was obtained illegally years before. So for say a fast Vratanuk in lie under the blind the Rivishin. So if you're not really a citizen, one will to the Hiranuk, how can you be done for treason, I guess was the argument. There were different appeals and all sorts, and that could be interesting for anyone interested in law. Shanska makes a shin simul hai inia will simaku sadli. But in the end, he was found guilty and he was hung in January 1946. Crockway in Nita Carcashay. I think the last person in Britain, or one of the last 2 or 3 people in Britain, hung for treason. Ceapan Grasa Bates mar Dinna Jernach, no Cian, St. Verts, no Tror Jernach, a Crocku Eid, like treason, Savratan. And of course, about 20 years later, the death penalty was stopped in Britain, where she'd stop lesh on death penalty. Some Pinos Bosch, Savratan. And that was it for William Joyce. Or was it? Visha Shin Cockrud like William Joyce, Binay like Joyce, no on Roushay. Well, it wasn't, because he did have a few daughters. I haven't had time really to talk about his family on this podcast. They were out on Tom on Hunlaurts, Fuin Clon, Air on Bulkhead Show. He had 2 wives and he had a few kids, the Kupla Posh that Ega. But he had one daughter called Heather, the Inin Awan Ega Darvanum Heather, who throughout the years after his death treats the blin to Therash on Pinos Bosch and Forshay and Nitsa Kirkshay. She led a campaign vi Fiochtaseki because he was originally buried in unmarked grave in the prison where he was being kept in England. So Erthus her size unmarked grave no uig on Marhal Zirk Tivmoids and Frizzle in a rouse Isasana. But she wanted to bring him back to Galway vi Shisha Igiri Gamekshai Rash in Olive. which is a bit strange. She kind of said no, he would have wanted to be in Galway, and his body left, in a graveyard and buried in Galway. Bheadh sé I géirí go gcuirfé in Láillimh, and that's the place really where it's from. Sin an áit a bhas even though he wasn't born there, and even though he hated Ireland in terms of the modern Ireland that it had become an independent Ireland, but buail leis an era a bheadh sé ag an buinte sin an independent Ireland, and around this time even if Action Ireland that wasn't even part of the Commonwealth era, fiú nach rá chuid in Commonwealth from 1949 onwards, wasn't it? Needs a Kirkconnell Glanzrai as sin. So it's a bit of a strange one. Buchley Nashlach, I'm not sure why she was so obsessed with this, but she did manage it. Diary Leahy. In 1976, and there was, again, colour footage on RTE about this, and you can see the video of this. The body, or the coffin at least, was brought back. So Tháinig Joyce nó a churp Uranus arás chuig Éireannaigh arás chuig Gaillimh. And still to this day, next time you're in Galway City, if you're up towards the sports ground where Connacht's play, man thought to an Accolation sports ground, known Dexcom Stadium and Tanamatar and Ish and odds of being Connacht Egg Immert, you're only about 200 or 150 metres away from the body of Lord Ha. Níl tuach céad is a quaig no gá slot o churp Lord Ha. He's buried in Bohermore Cemetery in 1976, where his body is still there and it's marked. You can find it easily enough. Tatunan all saw and he's buried quite close to Lady Gregory, I believe. Tá sé soch congrach le Lady Gregory Gapam Covma. And that's where his body is, and that is the end of the story about William Joyce, Lord Ha. Sin deire on scale, modula William Joyce, August Lord Ha. Unbelievable to think he was only 39 when he died, and that much happened in such a short life. Do chreid an smuoinú nach raibh sé trochaní nor fór sé bás agus an méid a hála tíbhaiste den na blianta sin. And then he went US, Ireland, England, Germany, and then back from Germany to England to Ireland. Agus sin an áit bhfuil sé inis. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Tásúlam gur bhain daithne an episode seo in Pulchreile. They're tougher to do, definitely, because there's a lot more info in them. Tá siad níos deachar le déanú, mar tá wad níos mó ólis tíbhaiste iontu. But I do like doing maybe one a month or one every 2 months. Ceann one beidir gach mí gach rábhí. One every 6 weeks, let's say. Ceann one beidir gach sé seachtain. And people seem to like these type of more history podcasts. Tá níon na pulchreiltí seogus na hagránní seo le daoine. It seems like that. Anyway, tá cumir Gultig Sulla Shin Erenos. So thank you very much for listening. As always, mille buíochas as a bheith géisteach. Don't forget to sign up for your free trial as a Learn Irish Online member today over on Patreon Hall or Patreon. Not only are you investing in the Irish language, not only are you helping keeping Gaeilge Weekly going, but more importantly for you, níos tábhachtí ditsa, you're receiving the very best information, videos, podcast materials, achfunny, pulchreiltí físeánaí that are available atá le fáil for learning and improving your Irish and learning real Irish, not just token phrases or history lessons. Speak to you guys next week by my Cloward Sliv on Sochtan Shogun. Big thank you for listening. Mille buíochas as a bheith géisteach. Goodbye and God bless. Slán ag Spanacht.